I am Koios, the Rōnin BeatMaker, and welcome to Lounge Rōnin. All things, everything. And if you are new to the channel, please make sure to hit that like button and ring that notification bell and subscribe. And please make sure to leave a comment with your thoughts below. And sprinkle in a dash of constructive criticism, as that will help me and the channel grow. And on this episode, we are going to discuss pre-dynastic Egypt. Now, if you are aware of or have seen my previous episodes of Lounge Roman, where I discuss the dynastic races, or the pre-dynastic races, I should say, then you will get a little bit understanding of what we're going to be talking about here. Um, I'm actually a little intrigued. I don't know too much about pre-dynastic Egypt, so we're going to be going on, we're all going to be going on along for the ride on this one. Uh, Personally, I feel that in regards to pre-dynastic Egypt, there are, you know, shout out to Bright Insight. He's convinced that Atlantis was a recock structure, and there's a lot of texts and regarding the Egyptians and potentially being descendants from Atlantis. So there's a lot of really interesting nuggets around in regards to the Egyptians. I mean, the Egyptians are a fascinating culture with an incredible history. We earlier, what was it, last week, the week before last month, I believe. I did a live stream talking about the Gypsy dynasty of Scotland, and how the Scottish people can actually trace their heritage and their origin from an Egyptian queen or princess by the name of Skoda. So highly recommend you check that out if you're interested. There is conversations with Solon and Egyptian priests, excuse me, where they are explaining to him that at one point they were able to travel to North America. Uh, and if you saw, I did a live stream talking about the Grand Canyon and the fact that there are supposedly um, is a cave riddled with Egyptian architecture and treasures. Check that live stream out after this. It's very interesting. It's even more peculiar that NASA has airspace control of different areas of the Grand Canyon. So yeah, the Egyptians are a very fascinating um, culture. The Whether it's the Egyptian hieroglyphics in believe it's on Australia. Um, so, the reason why I'm bringing up these various little tidbits of information is just to kind of give you guys an idea of how like expansive and fascinating and curious the Egyptians are, and I am curious personally if some of this information that I just brought to you is stuff that the pre-dynastic Egyptians were privy to. But without further ado, let's get into it. Give me 1 second, guys. Sorry about that, guys. Just realized that for some odd reason, my Rumble link didn't go through, which is unfortunate. But I'm just letting people know over on Rumble what's going on. Um, okay. Alrighty. Let's get into it. All right. This article was written June 29th, 2020 by Aleska uh, Vukovic. Predynastic Egypt. Life before the pyramids. The history of ancient Egypt spans several millennia and is filled with wonders and achievements, which are veiled in mystery and the enigmatic secrets of distant times. For decades, the archaeological excavations and the discoveries in the field of Egyptology never ceased to amaze both the scholars and the world. But rarely do we stop to think about pre-dynastic Egypt and the very beginnings of a powerful civilization. Where did it all come from? How did the peoples of the Nile Valley develop into such an amazing and highly advanced civilization? Now, before we jump into the main sections of this article, I want us to familiarize ourselves just a little bit with dynastic Egypt, with a very important discovery. And this will help to allow us to really further understand exactly what we're dealing with in terms of pre dynastic Egyptians. All right. Now, this article was written April 26, 2020 by Ed Whelan. Ancient cave found in Egypt with unique predynastic rock carvings. In Egypt, archaeologists from the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities have found a mysterious and diverse collection of rock art. They were located deep in a cave in the Sinai and are not like anything else found yet. These enigmatic images could provide invaluable insights into the prehistory of Egypt. As an archaeological mission from the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities were investigating a cave at Wadi al Zalum in northern Sinai, it was during their exploration of the site that they found the mysterious rock carvings. The site is located in a valley in the mountainous area and is about 76 miles south of the city of Al Qantara, Shraq, and some 38 miles east of the Suez Canal. Here we have an image of the outside of the ancient cave that was found in the mountainous areas in northern Sinai. Photo courtesy of Ministry of Antiquities. Unique rock carvings. The cave is located high on the hillside overlooking the valley, and it's made of limestone. It is quite difficult to access. The height of the cave is 60 feet and 45 feet deep. In the cavern, the team of experts were shocked to find large number of rock carvings that are of a type never seen before. Ayman Ashwawi, a senior official with the Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities, told Egyptian Independent that this cave is the first of its kind to be found in the area. Sinai has a great many rock carvings, and an important collection of them was found at Al Jajardin Cave. Earlier this year, the in the south of the peninsula. Here, a great many images were found that predated the pharaohs and that possibly date to 10,000 years ago. They were stylistically similar to other examples of cave art in the northern valleys of Sinai. See, here we have the rock carvings of a type not seen before in the region. Photo courtesy of the Ministry of Antiquities. Now, they look like animals. These kind of look like maybe horses. I'm not really familiar necessarily with all of the wildlife within this area, but they do look like they could be some type of like a deer. It's hard to make out, but at the same time, they're very detailed. First of its kind in Sinai. Ayman Ashwami told Egypt Independent that the newly explored cave features an utterly unique assortment of carvings unlike those from the South Sinai valleys. There are a great many more in carvings than in the Al Sajari cave. The director of Sinai Antiquities and head of the mission, Dr. Hisham Hussein, told Egypt Today that most of the scenes were carved along the walls of the inner cave. Now, I guess what's interesting to me about this is like, you have all the rock carvings in France, and now we have rock carvings here in Egypt. And even what's different about, well, I guess in the ones in France, they were painted, while here in Egypt, these are carved. Now, if you notice, um, and if you kind of like think back to, use your memory and just kind of remind yourself of what the cave paintings in France kind of look like. They kind of look like, like stick people and like stick kind of drawings of animals, but you could get an idea of even the type of animals that they were. Here, they're carved into the wall, which I think is, a lot more different, and actually what takes a lot more work and level of detail. So I'm curious personally if there is some sort of a level of intelligence in regards to the paintings in France and in regard to these carvings in Egypt. And we have to also kind of take into consideration the fact that these carvings are found 10,000 years ago, but Gobekli Tepe was buried 12,000 years ago. So we do know that there was a level of advanced society and technology going on. So, it gets kind of, for me, I'm just as I'm reading now, it starts getting a little confusing because, or even maybe a little contradictory, because we know at different times that there was clearly an advanced civilizations, but we also know that there were, global resets, via, cataclysms or drastic changes in atmosphere and environment. So it gets kind of muddy, especially when you think about even around at this same time period, there were, giants running about in North America building these incredible mound cities. So it starts getting funny, to me personally. Okay. The carved images found in northern Sinai are different from those found elsewhere in the peninsula. They are more akin to the bas relief, and the figures tend to be projected out of the surface of the cave walls. The rock art found elsewhere in the area, such as those at Al Sanjardi, were made by chipping away the rocky surface of the caverns and apply pigments to color the engravings. So here we have uh, an image of one of the engravings. Most of the carvings projected out of the surface of the cave walls. Photo provided by the Ministry of Antiquities. Now, this, I mean, it looks like a horse. And even like I was saying, I mean, this is in many ways more detailed than those found in France. And it takes, a level of skill because you're chipping away. I don't know, this starts getting really funny to me. Cave used for thousands of years. Dr. Hisham told Aram online that the rock art depicts animals, including camels, deer, mules, mountain goats, and donkeys. Some of the animals depicted have long ago disappeared from the area, and this may help researchers to date the rock engravings. Images of animals have also been uncovered in other caves in Sinai and other sites all around the world. A great deal of animal waste and the remains of the fires were found in the cave. This suggests that the local people still use the caves to shelter with their animals during the winter. It appears that the site has been used by people for a millennia. Here we have another image. The carving included animals such as camels, deers, mules, mountain goats, and donkeys. This one is an image of what looks like a mountain goat. Another photo provided by the Ministry of Antiquities. And what's interesting is, how it says that these are animals that are now not found in this area anymore. Now, I don't know if that's due to overhunting, or is it due to the drastic changes in the environment? Because we have to remember that, this is 10,000 years ago. Göbekli Tepe was buried 12,000 years ago. It predates the Egyptian pyramids. It starts getting really interesting to me because we know that, during those cataclysms, there were pockets of civilization that pretty much survived and had to restart. So it just gets really funny to me personally. Ancient settlement. Aram Online reports that the remains of circular stone buildings were discovered and were unearthed near the location of the rock carvings. It was found some 140 feet south of the site. It is believed that those are the remains of an ancient settlement. It is not known if the settlement is contemporary with the rock art or if the people who live there are responsible for the images deep in the limestone. Dr. Hisham and his team will now record and catalog the rock images. It is possible that more may be found elsewhere in the limestone cavern. They will attempt to date the images based on their style and identify if they can be linked to any known historical society. It is too early to establish if the mysterious images were made by the people from a previous unknown culture. So, this is in Egypt. This is pre-dynastic time. We don't necessarily know who necessarily the origins of this culture. We don't really know where they trace their origins from. But like I was saying, this really just ties into this whole idea of, what Graham Hancock has said is, being a species with amnesia, or even a species that has lost so much knowledge that it's relegated to very basic fundamentals. And I think that's something that we're kind of seeing in regards to these drawings in Egypt. But like this whole idea of pre-dynastic Egypt, when I was talking about the dynastic races, we were discussing the pre-dynastic and the post-dynastic races. And in that video, we looked at the origins um of Noah's son Joseph, and how he essentially kind of repopulated that entire area. And this is after the Great Flood. So, I'm just saying that there's a lot of correlations, the further we delve into things. Okay. Oh, sorry, guys. Having a little bit of a tech issue. Let's see if I fixed it. Yep, okay. We are back. So, I'm just saying, like, we really have no idea exactly what we do, but we don't. It's just funny to me that we have this idea of a loss. Well, let's get into it. I don't want to get into a rant right now, so I apologize. Let's get right into it. The long age of pre-dynastic Egypt. The areas adjacent to the fertile Nile valleys were always a hotbed of human development. To understand the emergence of the earliest pre-dynastic Egyptian society, we need to reach far back in time. Some of the earliest steps of evolution and development in the Nile Valley began as early as 120,000 years BC. One of these was the Acheulean culture, a primitive stage of early human development, characterized by stone tools of an oval pear shape. As Homo sapiens gradually took over Homo erectus, different cultures took the spot with further advancements in primitive technologies. Now, it's possible that the Acheulean culture may have been the culture that was in the Sinai Valley that was um, carving the animals. It's possible. One of the unique cultures of prehistoric Egypt and development was the so-called Kormusan culture, named for the site of Kor Musa, near the later famed Egyptian site of Wadi Halfa. This society appeared around 45,000 years BC, around Maghreb. Had to cough. This society appeared around 45,000 years BC around Maghreb and the southern regions of the Sahara. One thing that is notable about the peoples of this culture is the slow abandonment of the desert regions and a migration nearer to the fertile valleys of the Nile. They were nomadic, following wild herbs and herds and making temporary camps in river valleys. And here we have an image of the area of Wadi Halfa of Nubian desert. Wadi Halfa is considered one of the oldest sites in prehistoric Egypt, where the oldest structures were discovered. Some dated to 100,000 BC. It was around this site that later Formosan culture was established. They were known for their technological advancements over time. They mastered the use of stone tools, but also developed the use of bone and hermite. It began sometime between 42,000 and 32,000 before present and ended around 16,000 BC with the gradual emergence of new, more advanced cultures. One of these new cultures that came afterwards is known as the Quadan culture. It moved into the Neolithic stage of development between 15,000 and 10,000 BC and is characteristic of several areas and settlements. These are well known. El Kebab at Wadin Halfa. Hold on a second, guys. I had my alarm going. Where? Okay. These are well known. El Kab at Wadi Halfa, the Fayum, Deir el Badari, Deir Tassa, and El Umari near Halwan. The pre-dynastic Quand culture and new advancements and characteristics which would be crucial for the gradual emergence of Proto-Egyptian identity. They were the first to take some of the earliest steps towards proper agriculture. They prepared and ate wild grasses and grains and made efforts to cultivate and harvest local flora. They also took up hunting and fishing and developed more advanced weapons and tools. During the several millennia of their bloom, the Quran culture began using pottery and weaved baskets and established unique funerary practices that included some early forms of necropolises and similar burial sites. They also developed sickles and grinding stones. Gradually, new cultures took place, each one making new advancements and laying bigger foundations towards the eventual emergence of the Egyptian civilization. And here we have artifacts of Egypt from prehistoric period from 4,400 to 31,000 BC. First row from top left, a Badavian ivory figure right here, a Nakwadar jar, a bat figurine to the far right, and second row, a diorite vase to the left, a flint knife in the middle, and a cosmetic palette to the right. Now, I mean, if you look at the, look at this cosmetic palette. The cosmetic palette is beautiful. The animal engravings, I mean, those look like those Egyptian dogs. I don't know the names of them, but I'm sure someone out there knows the names. What's that? Look like a crane. We also have a crane in there as well. I mean, these are beautiful and impressive. And and that's why when I was saying about this idea of, the the pre-dynastic Egyptians, you know, may have been the descendants of the Atlanteans that traversed their way from the Rekok structure through the desert all the way into Egypt. I'm just spitballing here, having some fun. But the level of technology is pretty advanced here. And to me, this is stuff that I don't know. I'm just saying that they're when you look at the pre and post dynastic races, and you look at the influences that kind of brought about these restarts in civilizations, everything seems to be connected, whether it's from the Sumerians and the Anunnaki, whether it's the Atlanteans. I mean, you look at the flood story and how it's pretty much the same all across the world. So when I look at these incredible pieces of art, and just these vases, and I can't get over the cosmetic palette. I just think that that's just next level. The level of and this is pre Egyptians. So that's why when we talk about how advanced and and creative the Egyptians are, and I know people want to kind of credit the Egyptians with building the pyramids. I'm talking to you, Zaki Hawali, the former head of antiquities over in Egypt, that corrupt motherfucker. Uh, we know that that's not the case. I did a live stream discussing the possibility that it was giants that built the pyramids. And like I said, if you watch my live stream where I talk about the mainstream academia and giants, I literally talk about the Hope culture, the Hopewell culture in North America. They were a race of giants with elongated skulls that were through like Virginia and like the mid South is where their empire was. And so even around that exact same time, you had these people in Egypt. So I'm just saying that there is some weird stuff going on. And I'm gonna have to, it's making me want to go back and do some dating. And I might take some of the dates from when I covered the giants building the pyramids, and the giants in North America, and what we're getting here with the Egyptians. And I might build a timeline, and I might do a little light presentation for you guys on that. Because I just think there's something here, just personally. I'm not saying that in general, but personally, I'm under the impression that there might be something here. So strap on your tinfoil kufis and let's get on it. And please, while you're at it, hit that like button. Leave a comment if there's anything that you suspect, any theories or speculations, or any little nuggets of information you think that might help us unravel this timeline. Because I'm as I'm listening, as I'm reading and looking at the timelines, and I'm reflecting on certain things, I'm like, there's something's here. I want to cover it. Like, I want to investigate it. So that might be another side project. I did finish one big side project of mine. I know I'm getting a little off topic, but I'm hopefully that one will be able to make its way to other networks and things like that. But I digress. Let's get back on topic. But like I said, I think that there's definitely some time period stuff here that I could look into, and I'll definitely, if I find something, I'll present it to you guys. But let's continue. An emerging identity. The Neolithic cultures. Okay, all right. See, this is where I was thinking about. Because I did a live stream about the Denisovans and their incredible mathematical details when making jewelry. It's very interesting. Okay, I'm getting off topic. I apologize. An emerging identity, the Neolithic cultures. And one more thing, it is obvious now from the research I've done in readings that these Neolithic cultures, the Denisovan cultures, they were intelligent, uh, humanoid, or not humanoid, but they were intelligent pre-human civilizations and cultures, and we cannot and should not take them for granted. Okay, now let's begin. An emerging identity, the Neolithic cultures. A formative culture of the Nile Valley during the Neolithic period was known as the Fayum culture. Around 6000 BC, the settlements that are characteristic of the Neolithic period began to appear around Egypt. Several scholarly studies bases these Neolithic emergence around migrants from Fertile Crescent region of the Near East, who migrated back to Egypt and brought with them agriculture. That will tie in with my predynastic series where I talked about Joseph and him making his way back into the Middle East. But like I said, after this live stream, go check out my two-part series on the dynastic race. Flourishing around 4400 to 3900 BC, the emerging, perhaps even earlier, the Fayum culture marks a period when people of the region were forced to move due to the continued expansion of the desert. This culture sequence emerged on the northern and northeastern shores of the ancient lake and oasis of the Fayum district. The inhabitants of its shores were dependent on hunting and fishing and were mostly nomadic and moved with seasonal migrations of large wild herds. Now, I find it really interesting where it says here that they were forced to move due to the continued expansion of the desert. So we know that at times the Sahara Desert was at one point a lush, fertile area. I believe they found one of the largest lakes in the world is located in the Sahara Desert. I might be wrong, so don't quote me on that. But what I find very interesting and telling about this is that we're now getting more of an understanding and an idea, like I said, about these um, post dynastic civilizations and cultures, and the idea that they're this idea of the Sahara Desert being fertile lands, the possibility of civilizations and cultures living there at that time, and over the course of hundreds and thousands of years, and drastic changes in the environment, whatever. I'm not going to get into all the different speculations affecting their ability to survive and having to constantly migrate. I don't know. It's fascinating to me. But enough of a Rōnin rant. This culture sequence emerged on the northern and northeastern shores of the ancient lake and oasis of the Fayum district. The inhabitants of its shores were dependent on hunting and fishing and were mostly nomadic and moved with seasonal migrations of large wild herds. Okay, I read that. The Fayum culture of pre-dynastic Egypt used unique stone tools which showed large shapes with notches and uh, denticulates. They began using arrowheads and socketed flint blades. Archaeological evidence shows us that rough linen was in manufacture, as well as woven baskets. One interesting aspect of the Fayum culture is the fact that they began living in small micro bands and extended family groups, which were led by chieftains. With this cultural trait, we can see the emergence of communities with strong leadership appearing in Egypt. In time, the Fayum culture was replaced by peoples with much more developed technologies, like the well known Badarian culture, flourishing from 4500 to 4000 BC. The Badarian culture and the Fayum overlapped, but the former was more advanced. Peoples of this cultural sequence lived in the Nile region, in the areas of El Hayamayam, of the areas El Hamanayam, Haman, Hama Hamaaya, El Matar, El Mostageda, and so on. Thank you for so on. Some tongue twisters. I apologize for the pronunciations. Contrary to others, the Badarian peoples lived in tents made of skins and huts made out of reeds. Notably, they cultivated wheat and barley and collected fruits and herbs and used castor beans for oil. Bones of domesticated animals were a characteristic archaeological find at Bardarian sites. Badarian culture in predynastic Egypt also displayed complex funerary practices, with oval roofed graves in each of the deceased were buried with many grave goods of ivory and stone, and food offerings. Two such large grave sites were discovered on the edges of the desert on the eastern side of the Nile between El Matar and El Matanan. Both Fayum and the more advanced Badarian culture are important segments of the spectrum in which future Egyptian civilizations developed. And here we have a caved figure of a Bardarian from the Bardarian culture, 4000 BC, from the British Museum. It's clearly a female. You know, one thing I also have to say is like we're noticing that these pre-dynastic races and cultures were pretty well advanced and seem to be pretty well off. But the question that remains to me, for me really, is, you know, especially when it comes to these pre-dynastic Egyptians, are these descendants of Atlanteans? You know, did they traverse their way here? Because, we know that there are areas riddled throughout the world where there is clear levels of advanced technology, and then someone moved in, and then there is a substantial decrease in the level of technology. But when we look into the past of the more less advanced cultures and civilizations, there is a level of traceability to this more advanced civilization. And most often than not, the mainstream academia, they're not going to acknowledge that. They don't want to acknowledge that, because that goes against uh, you know the indoctrination, and that goes against the money that lines their pockets. So I just think it's really interesting to keep these things in mind, especially when it comes to researching biblical aspects of our time, of our history. Because if you don't want to accept it or not, I have the biblical time period and stories and cultures coincide a lot with the archaeological studies. And I know the mainstream academia was trying to do everything they can to suppress that and destroy that kind of type of knowledge, but it's getting harder and harder to hide it. It's just so apparent. But let's get back into it. Enough of a Rōnin rant. Nakada, the earliest face of ancient Egypt, but perhaps the best research of these cultures and the most important in the story of pre-dynastic Egypt is the so-called Nakada culture. Its earliest form emerged around 4000 BC and was also called the Amratian culture, or Nakada I. Several things characterized this uh, Chalcolithic, yeah, Chalcoltic culture. Pottery became more advanced, and trading was established between upper and lower regions of Egypt. Other trade was established with Nubian regions, from where obsidian and gold were imported. Notice the important words there. Nubian. I'm not going to get off topic. The next step in Nakada culture is stage two, also known as the Grazine culture. The Nakada 2 thrived from around 3500 to 3200 BC and was centered around Gerzat. This period was crucial in laying the foundations for Egyptian civilization. Nakada 2 was an unbroken, gradual development from Nakada 1, emerging in the Nile Delta and spreading through the Upper Egypt region, south and spreading south through the Upper Egypt region. It is possible that it formed even before 3500 BC, alongside a similar Umari B culture. Archaeological evidence of this culture displays new developments in ceramic ware with unique styles, iconic motifs, and natural imagery. This culture had all elements of Proto Egyptian civilization emerging, from first elaborate burials, necropolises, funerary items, and other elements coming into use. During this period, trades outside of Egypt's borders became prominent. Evidence of trade with Sinai and Palestine are found, and centralized power emerged. Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, well, don't tell that to the redacted. And as the desert approached more and more, these peoples became increasingly dependent on the fertile Nile Valley for their food source and raising of crops. This increase of food made a gradual shift towards sedentary lifestyles, and Egyptians formed cities, some of which numbered up to 5,000 people. Now it's interesting. They were making claims that no one was living or active during these time periods, and here we have people living and active. Not only living and active, but they're literally having to live through this drastic change in the environment from these lush, fertile jungle lands to desert. It's pretty incredible. During Nakada 2, copper became widespread in use. Even though high quality stone weapons were still fashionable, copper was also dominant. One of the greatest examples of pre-dynastic ceremonial flint weaponry comes from this period and is known as the Gabel el Arak knife, a ceremonial knife. It is made under a strong Mesopotamian influence, with an elaborately carved ivory handle and an exquisite flint blade. It is an important insight into the early relations between emergent Egypt and Mesopotamia. And here we have a photo of the Gabel el Arak knife. And yeah, look at the carvings in the ivory handle. It's incredible. And it looks like people. Yeah. I'm telling you guys, look into, watch some of my live streams about the Denisovans, and just be amazed at how advanced these civilizations are. And I'm under the impression that some of this technology and levels of technology are either were taught to them, or it was passed down from their ancestors of a more advanced time. I'm telling you. I'm telling you. Especially when you talk about the influence of Mesopotamia. Okay, I don't want to. Okay, no more rants. It is these Mesopotamian influences that led to the theory that the Egypt of that period was ruled by a Mesopotamian ruling class, although this theory is no longer supported by scholars. The final stage of pre-dynastic period of Egypt and the crucial part of its formation is Nakata 3 period, also known as Dynasty 0, or the pre-dynastic or the proto-dynastic period, a further development of the preceding Nakata 2. This period lasted from 3200 to 3000 BC. This period marked the height of the pre-dynastic Egypt's striving towards a political unification and a state formation, and the first mentions of ruling kings of powerful regional political entities known as polities. During this proto-dynastic period, the first shapes of an emerging Egyptian civilization that were known today became visible. The powerful polites that arose in the valley of the Nile were city-states, were three most powerful ones being Thinis, Nekhen, and Nakada. And the one that rose on top of these three is almost mythical. Thinis. Thinis was a city-state that was attested in many ancient historical sources numerous times. But even so, its remains were never discovered. All sources and evidence point to a location near Abydos, another important Egyptian city. Here we have an image of the Bull Palette, a famous piece attributed to Nakada third period of proto-dynastic Egypt. And well, I guess not. Never mind. Uniting the two crowns of Egypt. Thinis became a center of the so-called Thinite Confederacy, a proposed tribal union that was one of the steps that preceded the unification of Upper Egypt. Thinis managed to successfully conquer Nakada and unify Upper Egypt. It then merged with Nekhen, seemingly without conflict, and conquered Lower Egypt. The rulers of this pre-dynastic period are often termed as Dynastic Zero. Still, the pharaoh that united Upper and Lower Egypt in the proto-dynastic period is not known with certainty. Ancient Egyptian records mention this to be Menes, a ruler of whom no evidence exists. Thus, scholars believe that the unifier of Egypt was most likely Namur. Namur can be considered as the third Egyptian ruler whose name is attested and evidence after Iri, Hor, and Ka. The most important evidence that supports the theory that Narmer was the unifier of Egypt is the so-called Narmer Palette, one of the most important archaeological finds from Egypt. Let me wet my palate. This siltstone palette depicts some of the earliest hieroglyphic inscriptions and the earliest known depiction of an Egyptian king. On it, intricately carved scenes depict a victorious ruler, thought by most to be Narmer, in a dominant stance with a mace raised high above his head, ready to strike a kneeling prisoner. On this side, the ruler wears the hejed, the white crown of Upper Egypt. On the other side is a complex layered display of several scenes, the largest of which displays a victory parade. On this side, the ruler is displayed with the deshret, the red crown of Lower Egypt, and also with a mace and flail, a traditional symbol of kingship in Egyptian art. The fact that the king bears the crowns of Egypt, which combined make up the Sekhemite, the royal double crown of Egypt. On the palette is carved Surek, a heraldic standard that bears a puzzle, rebus, which shows a catfish and a chisel. The puzzle is actually a name. Catfish in ancient Egyptian was Ner, while the chisel was Mer. Together, they form a phonetic representation of the name Namar. Wow. Mankind's development observed. With the unification of Egypt and the establishing of the first kingdoms and the earliest dynasties, the official timeline of ancient Egypt begins. The pre-dynastic period serves to offer us a perfect glimpse into the complex process of a developing civilization, a process that lasts for several millennia. It shows us how different groups emerge and disappear, and how each new century places man one step ahead with new technologies and refined tools. Step by step, centuries by century, millennia by millennia, the peoples that emerged in the desert regions of Egypt and the fertile valleys of the Nile built a complex set of beliefs and myths, establishing technologies which would bring to life one of the most important civilizations in mankind's history. Finney. But one thing I want to cover about the pre-dynastics that we didn't get to cover earlier is I want to talk about their burial grounds. Oh, hold on. I'm a bit of a weirdo. I have like 800 different alarms for 800 different things to remind me of 800 different things to do. But I wanted to also talk about the burial grounds because as we all know, burial culture in Egypt was fundamentally very, very important. And I think to kind of better understand a little bit more about the pre-dynastic Egyptians, I think it's important for us to also kind of look at their burial grounds. But one thing that's just like I was saying earlier, and I'm going to say it again, like these pre-dynastic cultures and civilizations are so important for our understanding of humanity and also understanding um, pre-dynastic advanced civilizations because let's be honest, the reality is that there were a plethora of advanced human and humanoid civilizations that were permeating all over this planet, and we need to address them, and we need to start implementing them into our history books. But the reality is that is a a false dream because it will never happen. But all I'm trying to say is that whether we're looking at pre-dynastic Egyptians and their ties to Scotland and Celtic mercenaries fighting on behalf of the Egyptian dynasties. I mean, all I'm trying to say is that when it comes to the pre-dynastic civilizations, we could learn more about current civilizations from pre-dynastic civilizations than we could from, you know, post-dynastic civilizations because the pre-dynastic civilizations are the building blocks of what allowed for everything else to um to grow and to bear fruit, whether it's the lost mathematical art of calculus that was created by the Sumerians and then rediscovered by the Hindus, and then rediscovered, quote unquote, by the Germans. All of these different things that none of it has been, none of it is, it's just rediscovered technology and cultures. That's, I guess, what I'm trying to say. And when we look at these pre dynastic cultures in Egypt, we get a better understanding of those other mythical cultures and cities that we don't want to believe in, whether it's Atlantis. I bring that up because there's a lot of evidence and and speculations that the Egyptians are descendants from the Atlanteans. So you know we have to take into consideration that these pre-dynastic civilizations, whether it's the Denisovans whether it's the Fayum, the Badarni, any of these that were mentioned in Egypt, like they were advanced. Where did they get that level of advancement? Was it because of influence? Was it because of gradual developments over time? I think it's more the latter. I think that they were influenced. I think that they were taught. I think they were given these lost forms of agriculture and technology to re-jump life in those various areas. That's just my interpretation, my feelings on it. I'm not saying you got to take me wholeheartedly, but I would say do your own research into it and make your own speculations. But real quick, I want to dive into the burial grounds because I think this is an important topic for us to understand. Hold on. Okay, here we go. This was written February 14th, 2020 by Ed Whelan. Huge predynastic burial ground found in Egypt. In the north of Egypt, a major burial ground with 83 graves has been uncovered by archaeologists. The majority of the graves date back to an era before it was a unified kingdom ruled by the pharaohs. The find is helping researchers to understand cultures that were older than the pyramids and that possibly helped lay the foundations of the Egyptian Old Kingdom. A team of archaeologists working under the auspice of Supreme Council of Antiquities, a government body, discovered the graves. Egypt Independent quotes a statement from the Egyptian Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities, and they were found during archaeological excavations in the Qawam al-Kijan region of Egypt's Dequalai Governorate, which is southeast of Alexandria. Here we have an image of part of the burial ground found in Qawam al-Kijan. The mysterious Botu culture. Archaeologists found graves from at least three different periods in Egyptian history. Aram Online quotes Mustafa Wazari of the Supreme Council of Antiquities as saying that the majority of the graves date back to the first half of the fourth millennium BC, known in Egypt as the civilization of Butu. This little-known society was based around the city of the same name that was located in the Nile Delta. Butu culture, also known as Lower Egyptian, is believed to have been enormously influential in the later development of the Old Kingdom. The Butu graves of the oval pits, inside which are burials designed in a squatting position rather than a sleeping position, which is very similar to graves found in South America, Central America, and North America. Just letting you know. A number of handmade ceramic funerary items, such as bowls and jars, were found buried with the skeletons in the grave. These also have been found in many other graves from ancient Egypt. And here we have an image of ceramics found in some of the graves. It's beautiful. Proto-dynastic period. The three of the graves date back to 3200 BC and are from the Naqada III civilization, as we just covered. This is also known as the Proto-dynastic period and is crucial in laying the foundations of ancient Egypt. It is very important in the development of the state institutions in Egypt before the kingdom was unified about 2686 BC, according to the legend of the pharaoh Menes. Now, as we know, we're not necessarily there is no evidence to prove that Menes unified Upper and Lower Egypt. In the burials that date from the Kata III, the archaeologists found skeletons that were also in the squatting positions and were surrounded by funerary objects. Two clay coffins were discovered as well inside the second group of graves, according to Ayman Ashwawi, head of the Egyptian Antiquities sector, reports Egyptian Independent. This type of coffin from the Kata III period have not been found previously in the region. Archaeologists also found in three tombs coal bones that contained eyeliner. Oyster shells were also uncovered at the burial ground. So here we have an image of a burial dating to the Nakata III period, and here we have the remains of a body in a squatting position. The burials are helping experts to better understand the history of Lower Egypt before the emergence of the Old Kingdom. Egypt Independent reports Waziri stating that the site must have witnessed heavy human activity during the eras of Nakata III and Buto. It also shows the similarities and differences between the two pre-dynastic cultures' funerary practices. There we go again, like I said, with my alarms. Egypt Today reports that Director General of the Dakahilya Antiquities and Fatih al-Talhwayi as saying that some artifacts dating back to the second transition period, the Hyksos period, the mysterious Hyksos people, who were probably uh, Semitic ruled Egypt from 1640 to 1532 BC. They found four burials related to this era, three of the adults and one of a young child. Interesting. I might have to look up these people. I do a separate live stream on them. In the graves, they uncovered handmade pottery and stone utensils. They also found personal ornaments that are made of semi precious stones and a number of amulets. Archaeologists also found the remains of the foundations of buildings that had been made out of mud brick, some ovens and stoves from the second transition period. Investigations are ongoing at the site, and it is believed that there are more graves to be found at the location. So there, that was actually I'm glad that we checked in on this because it gives more allows us more of a perspective on the unification of Dynasty Zero. And we can speculate that when um, the Nis conquered Nakata 3, that they absorbed a lot of their burial practices. And it just seems like Dynasty Zero just essentially absorbed the various cultures in Upper and Lower Egypt of Upper and Lower pre-dynastic Egypt, and absorbing those cultures and funerary practices, religious practices, you know, wedding practices, what have you, and that essentially kind of formed the basis and the foundations for Dynasty Zero, and the emergence of the Egyptian dynasties. But to me, I want to look up some of the more mysterious cultures that aided in the creation of the Egyptian dynasty, because I'm wondering, can we trace those mysterious cultures back um, to Noah and his sons essentially restarting civilization in the Middle East, in Eastern Europe. I think that there's some stuff there. I truly do. So I'm definitely going to do some research and look into that stuff, and maybe do a future live stream regarding those topics. But what we now know is that there was a lot going on in pre-dynastic Egypt. And me personally, I think a lot of it correlates to uh, Noah's son, but I'm not going to go off into another tangent. I've gone on enough already. But I really think that for everyone out there, start doing some research into these pre-dynastic cultures and races. And I really recommend you check out my live stream series on the dynastic races 1 and 2. I really recommend you check out my two-part series on mainstream academia and the lost race of giants. And check out my two-part series on did giants build the pyramids. I think that will, for anyone who's really interested in this kind of period, in this knowledge and topic, I think you watch those live streams, you'll get a better understanding of what I'm talking about in regards to these various advanced civilizations and these global resets. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Lounge Rōnin. All things, everything. If you are new to the channel and you've made it this far, please hit that like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. And share this stream out with any like-minded viewers and anyone interested in said topics. And please make sure to leave a comment with your thoughts below and sprinkle in a dash of constructive criticism, as that will help me and the channel grow. And until next time, stay positive, stay focused, stay true, and much love.